What's up guys? Today we're taking a look at my 350Z to see just how much damage I cause crashing this thing while drifting. At first glance it doesn't look great, but it doesn't look that bad. The core support is definitely ruined. That headlight bracket's totally smashed. The worst damage is actually a little bit further in, but I think I'm going to get some stuff taken off so we can get a better look. So let's start by getting that headlight bracket out of here and see what we're working with. Need that. Don't need that. Alright, so we got the radiator off, got everything kind of taken off the front end of this thing so we can really see what we're dealing with. Let me show you a closer look and then I'll kind of explain the dilemma I'm having. I'm not sure which direction to go here. So from this shot you can really see what's going on here. Obviously we have one nice straight frame rail, never been hit, and one not so nice frame rail that has been hit 3 times now. So if you've been following the build for a long time, you know this frame rail was hit, repaired pretty terribly from the first owner or whoever owned this thing, and then I repaired it again, and then I crashed this corner again, and yeah, now this is the 3rd time it's been hit and probably the worst one. So how are we gonna fix this? That's the big question here. So the dilemma I'm having is my plan was to do a tube front on the crashed Z, the red one. I was gonna buy a bender, a way nicer welder, take my time and really learn kind of the fundamentals of fabricating by building a tube front on that car. I figured that was the perfect car to learn on. I could take all the time I needed. That car didn't need to be done ready for anything. It was just kind of going to be a project that I wanted to take on, and then I was going to use that skill and the knowledge that I learned from that and apply it to my car, because obviously I would like a tube front end on this thing. I'm really not a fan of the plastic core supports that these come with, but now here we are. This thing needs a front end, and the question is, can I figure out a tube front end, get a tubing bender? I guess I could just use the welder I have and throw something together really quick, because like I said, we have 2 weeks until drift roulette. Actually, by the time this video comes out, it's probably even less time, but 2 weeks sounds like a lot of time, but with a full-time job, it's really only a couple of days. So do I have enough time in a couple of days? Do I have the money to get a bender, whether or not I want to get a welder, and then obviously all the material to build this thing? And do I really want to do something like that and do it rushed? Now maybe I could bring on some help. I could find someone who knows what they're doing. But again, that kind of eats into the budget side of things. So I don't know. I'm kind of just playing all the scenarios in my head, because I can also maybe just hammer this thing straight, throw a factory core support on it, and even if I have to, you know, ghetto rig a few things, maybe it'll work. Or I can cut this one frame rail off and maybe do like a box section and have that bolt up to a factory core support. But then I'm spending money on a temporary fix, and I don't know. I think step 1, I'm just going to put a bar inside the frame rail and see if I can get it to get straight enough, and then I'm going to take a look and see how far the damage goes back. If it doesn't go back too far, I'm thinking I'm just going to chop it off and maybe just rebuild a little square section and just call that good for now. But I really got to see what we're working with here, which means trying to fix it, or straighten it rather, and then see how far the damage goes, because if it goes further back, there might not be a quick fix on this one. Well, to no one's surprise, that didn't do much. So got a jack underneath it, kind of putting some pressure from the bottom because it was a little down, and I've got a breaker bar shoved a bit deeper into the frame, and then a jack handle on that. See if we can get it to move. Camera kind of swiveled on its mount there, but as you can see, we are getting somewhere. It's definitely not as bent. So I think I'm just gonna kind of make this work. Maybe at most chop it off where this kink's at, because this was the worst. It was bent like pretty far over, but this is not bad. Like I said, this was here before, this damage. That's where I plated it long time ago. And thankfully the damage doesn't go any further back than right here. which is really important because this is actually the front sway bar pickup point, and while I'm not running a front sway bar right now, any damage further back than this would not be good, because that would mean this would be compromised, and if I had to cut this off, I'd have to like remake that and blah blah blah, a bunch of work. So to sum all that up, when it does come time to tube front this thing, it means I don't have to cut the frame rails really far back. I can cut them in front of that sway bar mount, which will save a bunch of work, and that means I don't have to mess with any of the suspension geometry or anything like that. That being said, it looks like I can get away without doing a tube front on this thing right now, as much as I would like to. It just really doesn't make sense with a pretty big event that I'm supposed to be competing in coming up really quick. As much as I would love to do a tube front end, there's no way I can do it in this kind of time frame, especially considering I have no experience with that kind of fab work. And if I'm being honest, I don't have the budget to just hand it off and let someone else do it either, because fab work's not cheap. So for now, I think we've got a temporary fix. Can at least get this thing kind of a bit more straightened out, and then I'll just have to pick up a new core support, slap everything back together, and call it a day. But now it's just a matter of how close can I actually get this frame rail to be in the right spot, so that when I do get a new core support, it kind of bolts on without too much effort. I'm sure it's not just going to fit right up and be perfect with how mangled this thing is, but I think I can get it close enough. And getting something in the frame rail and bending it, I think I'm at the limit there, so that means resorting to other measures, which is fire and a really big sledgehammer. We're making some good progress here. Honestly, it's coming out better than I expected. When I first pulled this thing in the garage and got a good look at it, I thought, man, I don't know if I'll be able to save this without hacking a bunch off, but I think we're doing okay. The hammer kind of got a little bit more, but we still got a ways to go. Let me show you what I'm thinking. So we got, I would say, the back half of the frame rail. What I mean by that is from this back is straight enough. Again, it's not perfect. There's still some wrinkles in it from previous crashes and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's not bad. I think it's about as bad as where it was before all this. So this little section here that is bent out, I think I'm just going to hack it off. It's only about 3 inches or so. And then just get some box tubing and just kind of bring it out, and that way I have something for the factory core support to bolt to. I think that's going to be the fastest and easiest solution, and that way I can get the core support, line it up, and be able to like weld it in with it all in place. And that should give me a core support that fits really well, and it'll be a good temporary fix until we can actually tube front this thing, because there's no way I was going to be able to get that done in less than 2 weeks. So time to break out the Sawzall, chop this off, and then come up with a plan to make our little extension piece. Time for my favorite part. That looks better. Don't need that. Now we've got a decent thing to work off of. It's actually straight, oriented correctly. I'll straighten up that sheet metal and we'll be good. There's no going back now. I really only cut off about 3 inches of that frame rail, and it was pretty mangled, and it was actually repaired before. If you've been a subscriber for a long time now, you'll know this car was salvaged before I bought it. It had damage on this corner, and that frame rail that I just cut was the most damaged part of it. I had straightened it out and patched it up before. It's really no surprise that it folded over like that. It was definitely weakened from multiple crashes. I think this is going to be a good thing, and even though I'm just going to do a temporary fix for now, I think down the road, when I actually address this, it's going to be so much nicer, and it'll give me the peace of mind knowing that this thing's actually straight and fixed. This is where we're leaving it for today. So, as you can see, chop this guy right off. Now we have a nice straight section of frame rail. I straighten this guy out a bit more. So what I'll end up doing is just put some rectangle tubing either inside here or on the outside. May have to trim this down a bit. Weld that up, and then it'll bring it out to where I need it to be, and I'll just put a plate kind of like this is, and then I'll be able to bolt the core support on, and we should be good. A lot of progress. I'm really thankful that the damage wasn't that bad. I have to admit, when I was at the track and I took a quick glance at that frame rail, I was kind of worried because, like I said, I knew that side of the car had been damaged before, and I was worried that the damage from that crash would have gone back further and it could have done some serious damage. So I'm really thankful that it didn't. And nothing's worse than it was to begin with, honestly. I just have to do a bit more repairing now. But that's part of it all. That's drifting. That's the chance you take for driving aggressive and trying to get better. And I'm okay with that. So I'm going to start searching for a core support for this thing, and the next time you see it, we'll be mocking all that up and getting this front end back together.
Tomorrow.
So I drove around town this morning looking for a piece of rectangle tubing that would be the right size for this frame rail. Sadly, my local metal supply shop was closed for the holidays, which means for another week. So I don't have that kind of time, so I just went to Lowe's or Home Depot or one of the two and just got some sheet metal. Now, I got the thickest sheet metal they make, which is not super thick. It's still sheet metal, but it's about the same thickness as the frame rail. At the end of the day, these cars are just a bunch of sheet metal stacked on top of each other. And also, this is going to be a temporary fix. Like I mentioned before, we will be chopping these frame rails off even further back and doing a cool tube front end. So for now, this fix is just going to be temporary. So the plan is, I'm going to bend this sheet metal into a rectangle, slip it into the frame rail, weld it from the inside. Well, let me show you. So I'm going to slip the sheet metal in. I'll use this as a reference. Slip it in just far enough that I can weld through these holes, kind of do plug welds there, weld it here, and then I'll have it stick out obviously far enough to come out to here where we will put our plate, and that's what the radiator support will bolt to. So let's get to measuring, cutting, and welding. One piece of advice if you are going to be welding on your car, it is smart to disconnect the battery. While I've done it in the past and not had any issues, there are so many grounds that ground to the chassis of the car. If you're welding on it, it can interfere with certain things. There have been stories of people messing up their ECUs and other things due to the current of the welding going through the car and blah, blah, blah. So take a minute, disconnect your battery. I actually removed mine entirely for something else I'm working on. So we're safe there. Let's get to work. All right, we've been making some progress. We're in the home stretch, kinda. Let me show you where we're at. Now, remember, this is a temporary fix. I wouldn't say do this if this was a street car. This is definitely not the long-term permanent fix, but it's gonna work for now. So we've got 1/8" thick plate steel running into the frame rail about this far back. I plug welded it in there and then obviously welded it to the seam there on both sides. This is really strong. I could jack the car up from this and it would be fine. And then we've got that sheet metal that I bent into kind of the shape of a frame rail. See, I drilled some holes in that. This slips over these, kind of a tight fit. Obviously I still have to like finish fitting it, but the holes, so I can plug weld onto that big piece of plate steel. It'll get welded to the frame rail here. Obviously I'll weld the top seam there, and that should be good. If we look at it from a side profile, you can see it actually sticks out a little bit longer than that, which is exactly what I wanted. Gonna give us some extra room, that way when I get the core support, I can bolt it to one side, line it up with this side, cut it exactly where it needs to be, and make sure that it fits really well. If I just kind of take a guess here, maybe take a few measurements and cut it, and then I'm just committed to that, when the core support shows up, if it doesn't fit, then it just is what it is. So I'd rather be patient, wait for that core support to show up, and then really dial it all in. So even though this is going to be temporary, at least it'll fit and function properly. Let me show you how it turned out. Again, this is a temporary solution, but if I'm being honest, as far as ghetto fixes go, I'm pretty happy with this. I mean, it does look like a frame rail. Doesn't look super pretty, but like I said, plug welded it here, plug welded that big plate steel in here, and then of course welded it all the way down. Now you can see this frame rail has been repaired numerous times. That was from the original owner, and then I kind of band-aid fixed it, and now we're really band-aid fixing it. So eventually it'll get chopped off here or there, and we'll redo the whole thing properly. But for now, this is gonna work. And you can see it's just a hair longer than the factory one, which is perfect for when that core support shows up. You can kind of take a look inside and see that plate steel there. So I did a little weld there. Like I said, we've got the plug welds, and that thing goes all the way back into the frame rail there. So it should be nice and strong. Should work. All right, the core support showed up, which means it's time to start making this thing fit and get this front end back together. Now, of course, this side, good to go, never been crashed. This side needs a lot of work. Now, I'm a big fan of using and reusing and recycling all kinds of little random pieces off cars that you're not otherwise going to use. In this case, I have the headlight bracket from the driver's side that we're no longer going to use. I actually got some really cool minimalist headlight brackets. I'll show you guys in a minute. But my idea for the crash side I'm gonna take this good headlight bracket, I'm gonna cut just that square out and use that to bolt the core support on. So let me chop this up. I'll show you guys exactly what I'm talking about. So I chopped that headlight bracket up. I got just the front plate. Now this used to sandwich in between the core support and the frame rail and hold the headlight bracket. As you can see, I welded some nuts to the back, so we have a place to bolt the core support to, just like factory. So this will now get welded to the frame rail section that I added to the car after I trim that to length. Weld this right on, and it should be just like factory. It might fit even a little bit better, at least better than it was because of how mangled this thing was. So I'm gonna get the core support back off, take some measurements, cut the frame rail, we'll weld this guy on, and then we should be kinda almost done, maybe. All right, here's the plan. So we've got this new plate that I made. Take the bolts out of this. I'm gonna bolt this plate to the core support and then fit it up, and then I'll tack weld this on as it's all together. All right, so I put 2 bolts in this side, that way I know where this is at. Now I'm gonna toss a level on the top of this and make sure we're somewhat level, and from there I can just tack this plate on in. All right, I set the camera down to get to work. Let me update you because I'm pretty much wrapped up here, at least at this frame section. Now it definitely doesn't look the prettiest, but it's going to work. So we've got our plate out front with the 4 nuts welded on, so the core support will bolt on just like factory. It's all welded on to that frame section I added there, and we should be good. I'm gonna throw a bit of primer on there so it doesn't rust, and then I'll bolt the core support on. It should line up perfectly, hopefully it does. And then from there we have to build something to support the core support from the top, because we're not gonna be using the factory headlight brackets. So let me get this thing all bolted up and I'll show you what we're working with. All right, while we're waiting for the primer to dry, let me show you these headlight brackets. Now I installed them on the non-crash side, the driver's side. I don't actually think I'll be able to use the entire headlight bracket, the new designed one, on this side because of the frame rail section I cut off, but they are really cool and I definitely want to show you guys. If you have a Z, I think this is a great solution to ditch that really big, heavy factory headlight bracket, the one that we actually cut up. These things are cool. Definitely saves some weight, frees up a lot of space, and they look cool. So I got these from the steelco.com. I'll put a link down below, but it's just this little bracket up top, and they actually have threads built into the bottom, so the headlight bolt's right there. And then this bracket down at the bottom bolts to the frame rail and then uses the bottom bracket for the headlight there. And you still retain the one over here on the fender. And that's it, that's the whole bracket. So you can see we now have a ton of room in here. Really cool design. As you saw on the lower one, it does bolt to the part of the frame rail that I cut off. So it doesn't exist anymore on the passenger side. So I will be able to use the top portion of that headlight bracket, but I don't know what I'm gonna do on the bottom. I may end up just designing something completely different for this side because the headlight also snapped like 2 or 3 of the mounting tabs off, so I don't really know what I'm gonna do regardless. But either way, I think that's a really cool product. If you have a Z and maybe you damaged a headlight bracket or you just want to free up some space in the engine bay, I think it's a real cool way to go. But let me show you the one problem it does create, because now the top of our core support is not supported with anything. I believe these were designed for someone who is not running a factory core support or not running a core support at all. Not really sure, because on their website it shows a Z with no core support, no radiator, nothing like that. I wasn't paying attention when I ordered them. I just thought they were super cool. So now we have to get creative with that. So here's the issue with these fancy headlight brackets. As you can see, bolts to the headlight up here, but nothing holds the core support on up here. The factory headlight brackets bolt on here, come down here, bolt to this part, they bolt to this part, and then they go around, basically like wrap around the whole headlight and bolt to a bunch of different spots. While we don't need all that, we do need something to hold the core support up here. So, yeah, time to get creative. I'm gonna brainstorm a few things specifically on this crash side because the headlight is kind of too damaged to even use one of those little brackets. So I have all the creativity in the world. I can do whatever I want on this side, and I'll take whatever I learn over here and apply it to the side that actually is together and does work, and we'll just go from there. All right, so it still needs a coat of paint, but check out my solution, at least on this side. Super simple design. It uses 2 factory bolt holes there. I haven't put the other one in because I'm gonna pull this off and paint it. And then the original holes here, I just welded a plate to this bar and then welded 2 nuts on the back side. So this bolts on and off like factory. That bolts in a factory location, and the headlight still fits in there. Now I need to figure out a way to actually mount the headlight because all the tabs have been broken off except for this one, which is part of the fender. So that's not really structural, but it will hold this in place, I guess. So I'm thinking, you can see it still fits in there nicely, but I'm thinking I'm going to use that little tube that I added in there and maybe just make a bracket, or honestly I might just zip tie the headlight right to that. Again, this is a temporary fix. That is really hot. This is a temporary fix to get us to the track next weekend. Worst case, I may just not even run a headlight and at least everything will be structurally sound. The front end is finally back together. This video has been way too long. It's honestly been a ton of work to try and get this thing where it's at, and it's good enough. I still don't have a bash bar. I'm gonna have to figure that out before the next event, but I'll do that between videos. For now, this thing is good. I'm happy that it's back together. It's honestly the best it's been, aside from this one headlight. But this is the first time I've had a brand new core support. The old one was so cracked in so many places that I literally had the radiator held on with zip ties, and now it is mounted properly. And I don't know why I didn't do this sooner. These things are less than 200 bucks, brand new. So if you have a cracked core support or radiator support on your 350Z or G35, whatever, just buy a new one. They're cheap. Anyways, let me show you what we're left with because I'm pretty happy with how things turned out. We've got our little tube that I bent around, bolts to these, goes up there, bolts into that. I have my headlight zip tied in. This is kind of the most ghetto of it all, but this headlight's shattered underneath. Like all the tabs are broken off. So we got zip ties here, there, here, one underneath, and that ain't going anywhere. If we look at this side, I actually just cut the factory headlight support so I can have something to bolt to. It was easier than trying to fab up something like that. So that works. I cut the whole bottom section out, so we're just using the top part. And we still have our cool little headlight bracket down here. Got the wires all zip tied up out of the way. And yeah, this thing is back together. Definitely thankful for that. I was worried when I first saw this frame damage. I wasn't sure what I was gonna do. And while this is a temporary fix, I'm definitely happy with how it turned out. I think it's gonna hold up great. Like I said, this is the most together it's ever been with the brand new core support. So while it's temporary, it may last a little while because I'm not ready to do a full tube front on this thing just yet. As you can see, it is still taken apart. We have the hood off and some other things, and that's because I've got some more mods down the road that I have to get done in the next like 4 days because Drift Roulette's coming up. It is next Saturday, which is only 6 days away now. If you're not signed up to drive and you want to, hurry. There's only a couple spots left, like literally 2 or 3. And if you're not driving, come out and spectate. It's gonna be an awesome event. I think the weather might be a little chilly, but it's definitely gonna be a fun one. As a reminder, that's at Willow Springs out here in Roseman, California. Anyways, guys, that's going to be a wrap on this one. Sorry if it was kind of a long, drawn-out video. It was a lot of tedious little work here and there to get this thing back together. But like I said, I'm stoked on how it turned out. Let me know what you think. For a ghetto temporary fix, do you think it's good enough, or would you have done something different? Drop a comment down below and let me know. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and of course, I'll catch you in the next one.